Hi everyone, it's David Threadgold here. I'm the lead coach developer here in the Onkaparinga Council. Looking forward to working with everyone on the coach developer program. This little video is going to give you some understanding of further understanding of the coach developer program. I'm going to talk through this slide and work through each of the steps. This is going to be great preparation for you before the training sessions that come along. So this presentation is going to look through these 6 components. We're going to introduce what is coach development, why coach development and the advantages of this program. Then we're going to move on to what the coach developer does, the outcomes for the coach developer program, and then we're going to look at some practice. We're going to do that practically, is we're going to really focus on practical components in the training, and then the next steps. So if we look at what is coach development, is coach development different to coach education? Is it similar to coaches being mentored? Look, um, when we look at development, I suppose we need to determine what that word means, and it's about improvement. It's about education. It's all of those components. But we're looking at coach developer being different to coach education, in that coach education we could see is potentially doing some courses and learning some of that. And here we're more focusing on that mentoring and development role with you, so that you have someone that can support you and help mentor you. So yeah, mentoring is another word that's it's very similar to what we do. Um, so what is your take on what coach development is? Look, let's continue and look through some further slides. But before the what it is, let's look at why we're going to continue with coach development. So I have a short video here for you to watch.
How do professionals get better at what they do? How do they get great? And there are 2 views about this. One is the traditional view. That is that you go to school, you study, you practice, you learn, you graduate. And then you go out into the world and you make your way on your own. That's how doctors learn. That's how lawyers do, scientists. Now the contrasting view comes out of sports. And they say you are never done. Everybody needs a coach. The greatest in the world needs a coach. So I tried to think about this as a surgeon. Pay someone to come into my operating room, observe me, and critique me. It seems absurd. Expertise means not needing to be coached. So then which view is right? Turns out there are numerous problems in making it on your own. You don't recognize the issues that are standing in your way, or if you do, you don't necessarily know how to fix them. And the result is that somewhere along the way, you stop improving. And I thought about that, and I realized that was exactly what had happened to me as a surgeon. So I asked a former professor of mine who had retired, his name is Bob Osteen, and he agreed to come to my operating room and observe me. The case, I remember that first case, it went beautifully. I didn't think there would be anything much he'd have to say when we were done. Instead, he had a whole page of dense with notes. Just small things, he said. Did you notice that the light had swung out of the wound during the case? Another thing I noticed, he said, your elbow goes up in the air every once in a while. That means you're not in full control. It was a whole nother level of awareness. He was describing what great coaches do. And what they do is they are your external eyes and ears, providing a more accurate picture of your reality. They're recognizing the fundamentals. They're breaking your actions down and then helping you build them back up again. After 2 months of coaching, I felt myself getting better again. And after a year, I saw my complications drop down even further. It was painful. I didn't like being observed. And at times I didn't want to have to work on things. I also felt there were periods where I would get worse before I got better. But it made me realize that the coaches were onto something profoundly important. I think it's not just how good you are now, I think it's how good you're gonna be that really matters.
Yeah, so what were the main messages in that video for you? I think one message is that you need to be willing to be open to receiving feedback and being critiqued. I think that's really important. But if we look over here, and we go to the traditional view, which he started with. You would go to school, you would study, you would practice, you would learn, graduate, you go into the real world, I suppose, how we get better in that traditional view. Um, but he recognised in that video that the traditional view doesn't recognise issues and doesn't know how to fix issues, and somewhere people stopped improving. And if we compare that to the sports view is you are never done. Roger Federer has a coach. He is never done. Everybody needs a coach. The greatest in the world needs a coach. And that last sentence that he talked about was, it's not how good you are now, but how good you are going to be that really matters. And I really like that phrase, and I'd like that to be the message to our coaches that we work with. So if we look at what the coach developer does, the coach developer is going to be the coach's eyes and ears and raise their awareness. It's really hard to have that perception when you're involved and you're inside the action like a coach is, but to have somebody step back, have a different reality, be able to see it from a different perspective is really important, and that's what the coach developer can do. They can provide an accurate reality, the observation and feedback in practice. They can provide a sounding board. They can be someone that the coach can talk with. They can eavesdrop on their thinking. They can recognise coaching fundamentals, and we're going to look at some of those a bit later. And non-sport specific strategies, we're going to really focus on the coaching strategies that are not related to specifically with the sport. And the coach developer program really looks to exploit the 70-20-10 rule, in that 70% of learning is experiential, on the job learning. So we're going to do that's why the coach developer program is being implemented, and not a training course, because the formal training or those education course has 10% of development as a coach occurs that way. And we also have 20% of learning is social, working with or observing other coaches that are around you. So we want to really tap into that 70% through this program. And then if we look at what the coach developer does now, we look to enrich the on-the-job learning experience through objective observation of the coach in action. So that's being at training and observing them, being at matches and observing them. We're going to provide them with feedback. We're going to give them an opportunity to have their reflection, and that's the conversation that occurs after the training session. So we're going to guide them through that reflection process, and we're going to develop an action plan or next steps for them to get better. So if we look at what outcomes are we aiming to achieve with the coach developer program, there are 4 real outcomes that we want. We want to improve coaching quality. Clearly, if we're working with coaches and trying to develop them, that's an obvious one. We want to increase enjoyment in sport by improving our coaching quality. We expect that our participants are going to have an enjoyable experience. Increased participation in sport, that's a real driver for this program. We really want to look at, and through the research with Flinders, we're really looking at seeing what participation rates are impacted through this program. And we also feel if the coaches feel like they're supported and they're valued, and that there's education and support for them, and with this coach developer program, that they'll feel like continuing in that role as coach. I suppose the other component that is that the big white elephant is winning. Look, I would expect with some of these processes that winning might be something that could occur, but we're really not focusing on that. We're looking at retention and having a good quality experience, and some of the discussions that our coach developers will have with coaches will be trying to potentially steer coaches away from focusing on winning, and having a situation where every player feels like they are contributing and have equal opportunities. So, that's something that we can potentially look at in greater detail another time, but it's not really a focus of what this program is about. So if we go on to the specific tasks of the coach developer, the first task is they need to set up an observation feedback session. We'll look at that. We'll call that setting up the session. Then there's going to be an observation of a training or match. Then they're going to provide feedback, and they're going to develop an action plan. So let's look at those 4 steps now. So setting up the session, this is a really important component. So here it is where you're going to communicate the arrangement that the coach developer and the coach will have. So here you might say something along these lines to the coach. Here, I'm working with you as the coach developer. I'm not here as a spy. I'm not going to evaluate you. There's no assessment or accreditation. I'm here just for you. And we're going to work together on developing you as a coach for you. Um, it's up to you to drive this process and potentially identify what you'd like to work on. I've also got some criteria that we can use to help in that process, but I'm really just here to help you with your coaching. So that sort of conversation um, is really important because that can develop the trust between the coach and the coach developer. And if we don't have that trust and that strong relationship between the two, they're going to be less willing to accept feedback and to really commit to the program. So that's a really important component. What do the coach developers hope to observe in their coaches? Look, after we've set it up, what are we looking for? Well, we're going to look at what education can help to guide us, and we're really lucky to have the resources of Professor John Hattie, who has been involved in the greatest body of research in education and what works best. He's had a quarter of a billion students being surveyed or evaluated through his research, and he has come up with the strategies that work in education. We think that they can be really well adapted to sport. And here are some of those. As a coach at Grassroots, what works best? Well, we've identified that clear and concise communication of the session objectives, and that's called in education teacher clarity. So we're looking at that being sort of coach clarity, the clarity of your message. It's important that coaches have high levels of engagement, that the students or the participants in the session are really highly engaged. They're very active, they're very involved, they're very committed to what's going on, that they have lots of fun. We're going to look at feedback and how that can be delivered and really focus and help with that fun and engagement by also having an eye and ear for what works well, and not just looking at giving feedback that looks for improvement, but by identifying what the players are doing well. And then the last one is really important, of course. It's to have a strong coach-player relationship and developing that. Okay. So, do you expect the coach and the coach developer will observe sessions the same? Well, I've already hinted at this in that when you're in the action, it's harder to see um, everything that's occurring around you. You might be working with one or two players or athletes, and that there might be something happening with others that the coach developer might see. And so it's important to acknowledge that you might have different perspectives, um, and so that's where the coach developer can help the coach that's in there. This is our observation guide. We're going to work a lot more specifically with this in the training session, but you can see a lot of those areas that we just talked about filling in there. And then you're going to, after you've observed the coach, you're going to give feedback to the coach with a 10 to 15 to 20-minute session afterwards. And we've written here the skillful engagement in this process will lead into an easy transition to an action plan. We'll call that that conversation, um, the afterwards the training session. We'll call it the grip process. So you can see we've got the coach observation guide down the bottom left, and then whatever you observe and put down as you're observing on that first sheet, you'll then transfer over to this coaching session review, and that's the grip process here. So in a simple process, the discussion that you would have following the observation of the training session or the coaching session will include first a goal. What was the objective of the lesson? What was your coaching goal for the session? So the coach developer would ask the coach that. They might have identified that at the start, but you might review that. And then the next question would be, what you'll ask the coach, what was good about your coaching session? You'll get them to talk about that. I would expect you to be writing on that grip form what they thought they did well, and then you would offer your input there. Can I offer my thoughts about what was good about your coaching? It's important to ask that they're comfortable with that. I'd expect most coaches would love to hear what you thought went well, but invite your opinion, invite them to say, are you happy with my opinions on this? And then if we look here, then we go on to the reflection part, the input part as well. What areas of improvement did you identify for your coaching the session? So you're asking then for input on what they need to improve on. So that's sort of their reflection component, the second part of their reflection. The input part is your components, but you ask them sort of in separate options. Then you ask, do I have your permission to offer you my thought about what areas I think you can have for improvement? Look, it's probably a little bit wordy there, but essentially you want to ask them, are you happy for me to give you some ideas about areas you could improve on? Really important here to get this part right. If you give them 10 things here, that level of trust is going to be damaged, I would expect. You really want to be easy does it, particularly early. You want to be giving them maybe one, maybe two areas. So pick your strong areas that you want to work on. And from the observation sheet, there's a section there where you highlight the major areas for attention. So pick the major area and just work on that. And then the last part, the P part of GRIP, is from what we have discussed, what are the two most important things for you to keep doing, to stop doing, or to start doing? So let's identify two areas that are either, one might be a keep doing, one might be a stop doing, or one might be a start doing. So let's look at what we can do. Then it's important to record that down. I would probably take a photo of that on your phone, keep it as a record so that you've got it for next time, and then give the sheet to the coach to take with them. And that's the whole GRIP process. Here's a nice slide to consider. If we look at coaching, is it more important to have retention of coaches or development, or if we call that improvement? And I think it's interesting to consider it as a continuum, in that right down one end, we might be happy for retention, where it's, do whatever you want. As long as you come back next year, we're happy to have you. At one end of retention, and at one end of development might be, look, you need to improve your game. You're going to have to change this. You're going to have to develop this. We need you to do training and education and courses, and it's all about development. I think we want to get a happy medium in the middle there. We're not going to be happy if the coaches are doing a particularly poor job and just say, come back and do whatever you want. We're not going to be pushing them to spend hours and hours developing themselves either, because we understand that they're often volunteers, and we don't want them to consider, oh, this is just too hard. There's too much work here. We want to make it easy for the coaches. We want to work with them. We don't want to push them too hard so that they don't continue on. Okay, so I think somewhere in the middle is a nice place on the continuum where we should aim. Okay, so our focus is not all about education, get better. We need to be mindful of the needs and who we're working with here. So that's our coach developer program in a nutshell. Happy to work with you individually and revising any of the points that have been made here. We're going to have further training and education opportunities throughout the program. I'm going to continue to support coach developers at their clubs and work with the coaches as well. And we're going to look at accreditation for our coach developers, a formal accreditation through Onkaparinga Council, and even move towards a master coach developer accreditation as well. So if we revise again, there are our outcomes that we want to get from this program. We're really looking at improving coaching quality, improving enjoyment for our participants, have the participation rates increase, and have our retention of coaches increase. So any questions, any comments, please get back in contact with me. I know many of you have all my details, but they're there on the slide. And I look forward to working with you throughout this year and hopefully beyond on this really exciting coach developer program. It's David Threadgold again. Bye for now.